Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for June 30th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is hour 1 of 2, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. As you know, we believe in the incredible checks and balances brilliantly put in place by the founding fathers. We reject revolution unless it's the Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. All right, Lowell Nelson's not going to be here with us next hour. He's out on vacation. A lot of people are taking off for the 4th of July, extended holidays, etc. We're going to be tearing it up for the 4th of July, though, man. We got a lot planned, ladies and gentlemen, so stay tuned for that. And I hope you had a delightful God, family, country-style weekend. I've got the good doctor with me, Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com. When you want to restore the republic, he's got an incredible To Preserve the Nation collegiate series, a book series, and DVD lectures, and a whole lot more. If you want to understand the Constitution, that's the place to go. Also, when you're at freedomsrisingsun.com, sign up for his weekly webinars every Thursday evening, 7 p.m., and you can be involved in the Q&As and all the discussions relating to the news and a whole lot more. It's available on BitChute and Rumble and just about everywhere else. freedomsrisingsun.com. Get involved. Dr. Bradley, welcome, sir.
Well, I thank you, Sam. I am currently in a really good sound studio, the front seat of my Jeep. I'm surrounded by fresh air and the Montana countryside and pine trees and everything like that. We've had 4 grizzly bears, nothing really current that I can report, but historically they've been kind of wandering the area, so I'm keeping my eyes open. Not really. It's not a high concern, but yeah, we're out and about too, so I think it's a good day. It's a beautiful day, in fact. So
yes, it is. Speaking of beautiful days, Sheriff Richard Mack with us, well known for the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org. Sheriff Mack recommends that Americans get involved with their sheriffs. We need the proper role of government, and that means sheriffs keep their oath of office, understand due process, and a whole lot more, so we all work together in the great National Sheriff's Posse, CSPOA.org, to become a member. Sheriff Mack, welcome to the broadcast, sir. It's a beautiful day.
Thank you, Sam. It's great to be with you this beautiful Monday morning. We usually on Tuesday. Beautiful Monday morning, and Dr. Bradley, great to be with you again, too.
Always good to hear your voice, Richard. I mean, I'm glad you're still out and about and kicking. You've done some good things for this country.
Well, thank you so much. Coming from you, that's quite the compliment. Thank you.
Well,
Speaking of that, good things for the country, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't really fail to mention, but on the 27th, a couple of days ago, it was the 28th anniversary. Can you believe it's been that long? First of all, but 28th anniversary since Sheriff Mack and other sheriffs, I think 7 in total, beat Bill Clinton at the Supreme Court. Sheriff, what do you say to that? 28 years, sir.
Well, with Don and I celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary, your statement about how time flies is even dwarfed more. But it's an amazing thing. I would testify in any court of law that time is moving faster every year. But looking back at this tremendous case that has engulfed my life and that of my wife also, we both dedicated our lives to this movement, to the constitutional sheriff movement, and to the restoration of our Constitution nationwide, no matter which public official or which citizen group are trying to achieve this miracle. But it brings me back to what Scalia did in writing this case, Sam. And in my little booklet review of the case on page 8, he quotes Federalist 39, and he's quoting, of course, Madison in that. You can't quote the Federalist Papers without quoting the Founding Fathers, because that's who wrote the Federalist Papers. But listen to what he says here. As Madison expressed it, the local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy. You see, the world in politics in America believes that the federal government is supreme, and that the supremacy clause in Article 6 bestows supremacy on the federal government, which is absolutely not true. And so he straightens that out right now. So the local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy. So we have part of the supremacy. And now listen to this. Further he goes, quoting, "No more subject within their respective spheres to the general authority than the general authority is subject to them within its own sphere." And then then it's quoting Federalist 39 at 245. So, Sam, what's significant about this is that we have to define the sphere of authority for the federal government and that of the states as well. And then this, the page before, on page 7, Scalia does just that. He says the residual state sovereignty was also implicit, of course, in the Constitution's conferral upon Congress of not all governmental powers. Well, then what kind do they have, Sam? But only discrete, enumerated ones. And he's quoting that from Article 1, Section 8, which implication was rendered express by the 10th Amendment's assertion. So we have to assert the 10th Amendment, which is exactly, as you know, what we sued the federal government on. That's what we beat the Clintons on. We beat the federal government, we beat the Clinton administration on that very issue, the 10th Amendment. And if we would just simply go by the Constitution in our country, we would not have this out of control, corrupt federal government always breathing down our necks. Because this idiot that just got elected in New York for the Democrat primary, and then AOC and Bernie Sanders just following around, bowing down to him and extolling his virtues as a progressive. It's not progressive. There's no progress in it. It's complete and utter socialism and communism, what this guy is proposing. And those are not prerogatives for government in America. It's exactly, socialism and communism are exactly the types of government our Constitution was designed to prevent. It's against the law what they're proposing and what this man is doing. It's downright criminal what he's doing, taking money from the rich and giving it to somebody else as if they own the fruits of our labor. I don't care how rich somebody is. However they got their money, whether it was inheritance or they worked their tails off to get it, it doesn't belong to us. It doesn't belong to this idiot. It doesn't belong to AOC or Bernie Sanders. It doesn't belong to my neighbors. And to propose this and act like it's just a prerogative for America is so out of line, counterproductive, and completely contrary to our constitutional republic.
Dr. Bradley, let's start there. The checks and balances are key, and really it has to do with delegated authority. We, the people, sovereign under God Almighty, delegated different authorities to different sections of government in an effort to make sure nobody got too powerful. Not even the President, Bill Clinton, has the ability to violate states' rights, dual authority here, or sovereignties, and there is sovereignty that portions rely on different delegated authorities that we've granted as the people through the contract, the state constitutions versus the federal constitution, the different branches of government, etc. This was all intentional by the founders to make sure no one got too powerful, Dr. Bradley.
Well, that's the whole basis of constitutions, limiting and bounding the authority. They enumerate the powers. 45th Federalist paper talks about they're few and well-defined. Scalia and Madison, you've been quoting, Richard, pretty sound thinkers. Too bad Scalia left us 9 years ago. But the point of the matter is that I really believe, and I don't want to take time too much from Richard, because I know that he's got so much knowledge about this, but holy cow, this, in my opinion, was a monumental victory for the reinstatement of these limited powers. And I think as grand and glorious as this defeat was for Bill Clinton's Brady Bill and all that kind of nonsense, this has application across a really broad spectrum. I mean, this wasn't a narrowly defined, like a lot of the things that we're getting nowadays. They kind of put it on a razor's edge. They want to narrowly say, well, in this case, we're going to limit the bounds or whatever like that. And I don't read that into this case that Richard was championing. I see this as a very broad brush telling the general government, I hate to call them federal, because if you go back to the 39th Federalist paper again, you can read it's not a federal government, and it's not a national government, but it is a federal government. It is a national. There are specific delegations, specific areas where the national government has this power, and the federal government has these other powers that are shared. And the fact of the matter is that in that 39th Federalist paper, it is just kind of a cornucopia of wealth on this kind of stuff. And Scalia hit the nail on the head. But you know, I think what Richard's group put together and won on was not just, oh, the Brady Bunch got poured back in their bottle for a few minutes. No, state and local governments need to lean on this often and say, stand by. Let's talk about this for a second. You guys cannot direct our activities. It is unconstitutional, and here's ample justice for this, you know. So yeah, this I wished I could get more people to read this blasted thing and see how broadly it can be applied, and let's start running the country like it's supposed to be.
Amen.
Sheriff?
Well, you know, it's hard for me to say Dr. Bradley is absolutely correct because he's talking about me and my case, and I didn't want to toot my own horn, but I guess that's kind of what we're doing today. But that was spot on, Dr. Bradley, and thank you for that.
But Sheriff, I just want to say, though, yes, you guys took the lead, but that's what elected sheriffs are supposed to do. So you basically understood that it was a violation of the Constitution. You guys took action and demanded, hey, due process for all citizens. Really, we need to tout the horn of the citizens that you fought for and represented, because we're all blessed by this decision. For the past 28 years, they've tried to pretend it's this narrow, defined, limited thing that related to sheriffs and guns and doesn't really apply to anybody, which is a complete misrepresentation of fabrication. The truth is it relates to every single American. And yes, we're grateful for you standing up, but at the end of the day, this is a blessing for all Americans. You set back, speaking of setting back Iran for decades, I hope Donald Trump did that, not so confident, but yet you did set back the gun stealing lobby several decades. The proof is in the pudding in your case right now for all Americans.
Well, that's true, and that's probably the biggest thing that it did nationwide, that this case had a huge part in saving the Second Amendment. And a lot of people don't realize how far that went because they hid that from the American people. The Brady Bill movement, they tried to keep it under the radar as much as they could, but just 2 weeks after I filed on February 28, 1994 in Federal District Court in Tucson. 2 weeks later, on March 14th, Senator Howard Metzenbaum from New York in the United States Senate introduced Brady Bill 2, and it never even made it out of committee. And large part was because there was litigation from a sheriff in Arizona regarding Brady Bill 1. After we won, Brady Bills 2, 3, 4, and 5, which were going to completely destroy the Second Amendment, never came up again. And so the hand that 7 sheriffs had in preserving the Second Amendment has been more instrumental in preserving this God-given right than any other body or national organization ever. Any legislative body, Congress, whatever, states, whatever, 7 sheriffs did more to preserve the Second Amendment than any of these other groups, NRA, GOA, and I'm glad they're there. But the fact of it is, the historical fact of it is, 7 sheriffs did more to save the Second Amendment than all of these other groups put together. And it gets very little attention. But the truth of the matter is, it's historical fact. And Sam, to go along with what you were saying about the states needing to do this, and the sheriffs in particular to do this, Scalia says this, he quotes Federalist 51. And he said he's talking about the states and the federal government both doing their job to enact and abide by the checks and balances. And he said, if we do that, then this is the next quote from him. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. Why, Sam? Why would that happen? Quoting again, the different governments will control each other. Now, how's that for reinforcement of the checks and balances in the Constitution? It requires different governments to control each other. And so that's why I
and
want
Sheriff Mack, that slaughters
the
this
sheriff.
idea that the president's in charge of everything and everybody. It also slaughters the idea that the courts can just randomly decide anything they want to as well. The mainstream press would have you believe no one can interpret the Constitution except for the 9 thugs that sit in office or whatever in adjudication over everybody. That's a complete lie. Everyone who swears an oath to the Constitution has an obligation to determine constitutionality and uphold it. These 7 sheriffs proved it, and these sheriffs literally stopped them. And we now know, hey, each branch of government has authority in their own jurisdictions to control other branches. That's intentional. And that's the part that these mainstream press people just cannot deal with, can they?
The CSPOA and Sheriff Mack and Sam Bushman think that the sheriffs can just interpret the Constitution and just enforce it however they want and pick and choose. We're the ones that say you can't pick and choose. We're the ones that saying you have to obey every facet of the Constitution. It's not interpret. It's not your own interpretation. Never. The word interpret or interpretation is not in the Constitution anywhere. We are to enforce, to uphold, and to obey the United States Constitution. That's the big difference between us and the pragmatic, piece-by-piece, Fabianistic destruction, an utter destruction of our Constitution, the way they have it all planned and put together. No, we're not part of that. We're the ones that are going to uphold and defend it, just like we promised in our oath of office. Amazing.
Dr. Bradley, they want to pick and choose when it comes to sanctuary cities, or they want to pick and choose when they think the president's like a god, that nobody could touch Joe Biden or something like this. He can do whatever he wants to. How dare you question him? But at the same time, when it's anything that's critical to the defense of the supreme law of the land, to the true checks and balances, they want to act like, hey, you can't decide that. Who do you think you are mentality. They're getting hit by a bus going both directions, sir.
Well, see, you remember the recent No Kings marches, and yet they want to act like there is a monarchical executive. I mean, well, they don't like quite the way Donald is doing it, but the idea is if they could get this idea that this idealistic kind of perspective they have, that there is a single point of contact that they can come to grasp, control, and manipulate into their agenda, that's exactly what they're looking. When they had the Joe Biden puppeteries going on, they thought that they could just, stroke of a pen, law of the land. That was said one time of Bill Clinton signing an executive order one time. Nothing could be farther from the truth. All of the powers are few and well-defined. They are specified. There is no other power delegated to the general government than those contained within the United States Constitution. And the Ninth Amendment was kind of a period at the end of the Senate saying, and we the people retain all other God-given rights. And the 10th Amendment says that, and if we didn't delegate it, you don't have it. It's very specific. What they want is to project this image that this single point of contact, and when their guy's in charge, or their gal at some point it'll be, when they have their person who's got the reins for their agenda, they're going to act as though it really is. You guys have got to go along because that's the supreme law of the land, and it's not. No, every single element, clear down to the individual, has basically retained certain rights and authorities and the ability to carry out what needs to be done, but they keep trying to push it to centralized power that can then lord over us all. And that's what tyrannies are made of. It just is the full case, and that's where they're going with this.
I think Donald Trump promised he would get rid of gun-free zones first day, Sheriff, and this is the case he ought to use to do it. You ought to just simply say, hey, we're getting rid of all this because, hey, the presidency or the courts or they don't have authority here, and these gun-free zones are a problem for the people. In Idaho, they just had a big old shoot-'em-up deal. I guess this guy in Coeur D'Alene, Idaho, lured a bunch of firefighters in and shot them up and everything else. We got to get rid of the gun-free zones or whatever. This Second Amendment win. It's really a 10th Amendment win and a Second Amendment win. I don't know how many articles of or Bill of Rights that it violates, but the lists are all over the place, right? The Second Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the 9th Amendment, and we can keep going, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Dr. Bradley's correct. When you look at the Bill of Rights and what the intent of the Bill of Rights was, and then you see the 9th Amendment and 10th Amendment, basically those are hooked together, saying to government, just in case you think we forgot something, you can't do that either. Because the federal government has no leeway. They have no prerogative to give themselves power that the Constitution doesn't already delegate to them. And the 9th and 10th Amendment make that very clear. And so just like in the case in my Supreme Court case, when they looked at the New York case of 1992, when New York actually sued the federal government, and again under the Clinton administration, that the federal government was trying to force them to take nuclear waste and just store it in New York. And New York said, "No, we're not taking your stupid nuclear waste. You're not our boss." And they won on that, and that's when they came out with this powerful statement. It almost sounds like crazy powerful, that the federal government doesn't have. And it says, "We have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction." Is there anything more clear that they are not our boss? And this makes it very clear that they do not have supremacy over the states. And where they do have some sovereignty, it's extremely limited. If you count and enumerate all the powers that they were delegated, it doesn't even total 40. Let's say I'm wrong. Let's say, okay, it's 45, but it's extremely limited. They cannot add to them at all unless they get 3/4 approval of the states, 2/3 of the House and Senate, and it's very difficult to do. And they have not done it, and they've stolen and usurped so many powers that it's actually insurmountable, and it's almost uncountable. That you can't even count how many they've stolen now. It's thousands and thousands, and that we've got to get that back. We've got to turn that around.
See, you guys,
Well, Judge Napolitano literally quoting what you have to say as well, Sheriff. In many, many situations, he's been writing article after article in your first year case. Ron Paul's been referring to it. Several other people have now started to refer to it more than I've seen in the first years of your win. They seem to have wanted to minimize it. But now that constitutionality is coming back and conservative viewpoints and President Trump's and all everything else, more people, I'm pretty shocked, more people are referring to your case than in the last 5 years than I saw in the first 20, actually. So hopefully we're gaining ground. I know you got to fly. You got about 20 seconds.
Well, Judge Napolitano's review of it has been very powerful, and I really like him. He's a good friend. And thanks so much for having me on, Sam. This was good therapy.
It's time to celebrate, brother, and we got to basically get some funding and promote this case everywhere we go. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thanks. See you soon.
All right. Sheriff Mack's taking off, ladies and gentlemen. Become a member of the CSPOA posse today, cspoa.org. That's how you can make a difference in helping all 3,000 county sheriffs across the country stand as sentinels to protect our God-given inalienable rights. That's who they are. That's what they do. They're the closest executive we have that we directly elect, and we need to take advantage of their authority and leadership. Sheriff Mack leaves us now, but Dr. Scott Bradley stays. Hang tight. More in seconds.
Pursuing liberty, using the Constitution as our guide. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. The Senate is back at it after debating the president's big spending and tax cut bill overnight. This morning, senators are going through a slew of amendments to the bill. Meanwhile, one Republican who's proven a thorn in President Trump's side has had enough.
Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina announced he will not seek re-election next year. The announcement came after he voted against advancing Donald Trump's massive bill of tax breaks and spending cuts. Tillis opposed cuts to health care programs. The president responded by berating Tillis in social media posts. He accused the Republican senator of seeking publicity and threatened to campaign against him. Greg Clugston, Washington.
In northwest Idaho, they're mourning the loss of 2 firefighters shot and killed in what police describe as an ambush.
Authorities believe a man lit a wildfire in rugged terrain on a mountain trail and then shot at firefighters as they arrived on the scene to tackle the blaze. The gunfire lasted for several hours as the wildfire grew, and police and firefighters took cover down below the popular Canfield Mountain Trail. Kootenai County Sheriff Robert Norris said they'd been tracking a cell phone signal, and then a SWAT team found a man dead with a gun nearby on the trail, though they did not say how he was killed or what kind of weapon was found.
The BBC's Regan Morris says a 3rd firefighter seriously wounded in the attack just north of Coeur D'Alene. There's been nothing yet on a motive. After President Trump called off the trade talks with Canada, the Canadians have cried uncle. Canada is rescinding a digital services tax on big American tech firms. It was supposed to take effect today. Now those U.S.-Canada trade talks will proceed. Watching Wall Street this morning, the Dow is up 170 points. The Nasdaq ahead 54 and the S&P 15 points higher. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Hey, it's Mike Rohn. If I have a choice, I like to do business with companies that actually stand for something. That's why I switched from Verizon to Pure Talk. No offense to Verizon, I'm sure they stand for something. I just don't know what it is. Pure Talk, on the other hand, is a veteran-owned company that supports our military in a big way, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I also appreciate unlimited talk and text and plenty of data for half the cost of the big guys, and I do like being on America's most dependable 5G network for just $20 a month, but what I really appreciate is no contract, no cancellation fees, and Pure Talk's commitment to handle all their customer service in this country. I saw it for myself. I went to Georgia, I got a tour of their headquarters, I met their CEO, and I talked to the same customer service folks that you'll talk to when you dial pound 250 and say keyword Mike Rowe. Switch today and save 50% off your first month when you dial pound 250 and say keyword Mike Rowe. Pure Talk, a wireless company that actually stands for something.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
You know where the solution can be found, Mr. President? In churches, in wedding chapels, in maternity wards across the country and around the world. More babies will mean forward-looking adults, the sort we need to tackle long-term, large-scale problems. American babies in particular are likely going to be wealthier, better educated, and more conservation-minded than children raised in still industrializing countries. As economist Tyler Cowen recently wrote, quote, "By having more children, you're making your nation more populous, thus boosting its capacity to solve climate change. The planet does not need for us to think globally and act locally so much as it needs us to think family and act personally. The solution to so many of our problems, at all times and in all places, is to fall in love, get married, and have some kids."
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Before we leave this commemoration, we spent far too little time on, but it's just a memory bumper for everybody. This is 28th anniversary was last Friday, 27th of June, that this victory happened, and it has been, in my opinion, way too narrowly applied, and there needs to be more, thought given to the fact that it's a broad spectrum antibiotic, if you will, for a lot of the bad viruses. Well, I guess antibiotics don't work on viruses. Bacteria that's being spread around by those that want to expand the general government's overall and overreach. But just as before we leave that, I just wanted to make a couple of thoughts that it's been 28 years. 28 years. I mean, how time flies. But the fact of the matter is that it's been largely forgotten by the vast majority of people. I would say that probably most sheriffs have never even heard of this, let alone local legislatures, your state legislatures. These kinds of things fade very quickly in the memory of the psyche of the nation, if you will. And it's a tragic travesty that happens. Now look at this. If we've been 250 years almost since those monumental acts were taken to give us a recognition, a canonization, if you will, of individual God-given rights based upon natural law, God's law. And so, I mean, that's almost 10 times longer than it's been since Mack and his cohort of sheriffs won this wonderful victory. And so what we have today is an effort to try and consolidate into a central point that actually could be somehow taken over, whether it's a fake election or it's some kind of court case or something that would say, okay, we have all power. It's all the reins of government are in our hands. And I think that people need to understand more clearly every single aspect of this wonderful document we've given. Now, let's just take, for example, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. It's the necessary and proper clause. It's a clause that says the general government has power to carry out the powers that have been given. What that's been misinterpreted, that's been misapplied, it has actually been hijacked, and a coup d'etat has occurred with that, where they say, no, that, my friends, is the elastic clause that says we can do anything we darn well please in the fulfillment of our duty as legislators or an executive or some judicial act or something like that. That is not what it says. Get it out and read it again. It says you have power to carry out the powers you have. It doesn't allow any expansion of those powers. And so every single aspect is being spun out of control now. And this victory that Mack and his sheriff friends were able to obtain, I think ought to be taken out, dusted off, and our state legislators need to say, oh, wait a minute. They are not the Lord and Master of us. Article 6, Mack mentioned about, this is the supreme law of the land. No, it's supreme in the delegation of authority that is handed to them, but that is only and all. In the 39th Federalist paper, as was pointed out by Scalia and by Madison, and Richard quoted it, it says basically there are delegated aspects of this, but they're limited and bounded with how they can be applied. So I think that this is kind of 28 years, and 28 years is certainly in my memory banks. I know it's gone by fast, but I don't think this has been thought about by hardly anybody. I would like to see it be made more popular. So I don't know, Sam, what do you think?
No doubt about it. Here's the deal, though. The mainstream press is deceived on this, and it's going to take some money for us to get the word out about the truth. The mainstream press wants you to believe two lies. Number one, this case was super, super narrow. It only related to the Second Amendment. It only related to sheriffs. And, That's lie number one, because it's so broad. When you read Scalia's comments, it's so broad, so definitive, so clear. It's based on other Supreme Court cases as well. As Richard Mack mentioned, that in New York, there was a big battle in New York as a state told the feds to fly a kite and won also. So this is on solid ground through the history of court cases, number one. That it's a very broad decision, not narrow. It just simply says, hey, there's dual sovereignties here in America. There's multi-jurisdictions, and the general government has no authority over these other jurisdictions. Yes, they're sovereign in their limited scope, but other than that, they don't have authority. So the narrowness versus the broad, based critical issue is one of them. But the other lie that the mainstream press tells is this. Hey, sheriff, or hey, government elected official, you can't really interpret the Constitution. What you've got to do is wait for the courts to decide, as if these nine-robed thugs have all God-knowing decision-making power, which is a lie. Anybody that swears an oath to the Constitution has authority to decide what's constitutional and not. Now, you can claim they're off their rock, just like Bill Clinton was, when he said, it's constitutional for us to take guns. Sheriffs, you'll do the bidding of the general government. And the sheriff said, no, we won't. But the president interpreted the law then and, hey, you know what? I'm going to restrict gun rights. He was wrong. He got cut down over that. But the thing that I'm getting at is they want you to believe that everybody who takes their oath of office, they don't really have the ability to interpret the Constitution. That's the court's job. And how dare you do that until the courts decide? And that's the biggest lie of all. And it's easy to prove wrong by saying, well, then why take an oath to the Constitution? If you can't do anything about it, and if you can't decide anything related to it, there's no point in taking an oath. It's so easy to expose their lie, but they've been able to perpetuate this for more than 28 years, Doctor.
Well, absolutely. And here's the deal. Thomas Jefferson wrote expansively about this very issue. And he very clearly points out that the Constitution itself does not, in any way, shape, or form, even hint at the fact that the courts really are the final adjudicator on all this thing. And he makes a very big point, and here's where we need to come from. All are bound to uphold the liberties we have. And so if you're a president, if you're a congressman, if you're a senator, if you're a judge, if you're a military officer, whomever, if you're a common everyday folk on the street, that the understanding needs to be from the clarity of the document itself. And Jefferson said, people that are judges, they have no more integrity than anybody. I mean, given time, given authority, given power, given accolades, given praise and glory, whatever it takes, their head's going to be turned. And we've got to always go back to that original document, and let's read it in its clarity. It's a written document. In fact, St. George Tucker called it a written contract. And in that document, they're written in plain English for the people that have taken the time to learn the language. And those plain English words have meaning. And those meanings can only be what they were in the day they were written. There is no logic, reason, or intelligence that says, oh, well, now we're defining republic as a democracy. Bravo, Sierra. They understood what republics were. They did not say democracy under their breath when they wrote republic. These things are clearly understood and must be taken back to someday, somewhere, and we've largely done this, by the way, in the nation, you can interpret the entire Constitution out of existence by redefinition of terms. And so Jefferson was very, very... And
to further your argument, Doctor, not to interrupt, but that not only did the Founding Fathers not mean democracy, they spoke out against democracy on numerous occasions, right?
Oh, there's no question about it. In fact, if you read the 10th Federalist paper, another James Madison writing, a clear-headed guy, I'm telling you. But here it goes even further. I mean, people... I've quit listening to State of the Union addresses and the Bravo Sierra that our governor or whomever gets up and they talk about, and this democracy, blah, blah, blah. I used to get so distracted when I listened to the State of the Union addresses. I read them now so I can skip over the democracy parts, cross them out, whatever, But I used to get distracted because I was stroke tallying how many times they said democracy. And democracy is Marx and Engels and Lenin and Mao all said that we must win the battle for democracy in order to implement full-blown communism. So, yeah, the founding fathers not only spoke against it, they understood clearly. And in fact, when citizen Edmond Genet came from France as a revolutionary to America, and there's a whole cool story we could tell about this.
Hold on, why don't we come back? Why don't we come back for the break and tell the story? Let's do that, Dr. Bradley. Okay. Dr. Bradley's with me, ladies and gentlemen. FreedomsRisingSun.com. Check out his weekly webinars, Q&As on the Constitution, and more. Sign up every Thursday nights at 7. Also get his collegiate series, To Preserve the Nation. Hang tight. This is Liberty Roundtable Live.
Get ready to be part of something incredible. We're breaking barriers and delivering the powerful stories that mainstream media won't touch. Your support is what fuels our mission to revolutionize journalism and bring you the truth. Join our passionate community of changemakers by donating at libertynewsradio.com today. Together, we're creating the future of news.
Do you know what is great about America? Ask an Immigrant. Ask an Immigrant is a new podcast dedicated to helping Americans, especially our youth, value, appreciate, and be grateful for the freedoms we have here in America. Join host Lydia Wallace-Nuttall as she interviews immigrants from around the world to discover their inspiring personal stories about why they came to America. To learn more about why America is the most prosperous, greatest country in the world, download the Loving Liberty app or go to lovingliberty.net.
The Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit legal foundation committed to protecting our unalienable right to publicly acknowledge God. The Foundation for Moral Law exists to restore the knowledge of God in law and government and to acknowledge and defend the truth that man is endowed with rights not by our fellow man, but by God. The foundation maintains a twofold focus. First, litigation within state and federal courts. Second, education. Conducting seminars to teach the necessity and importance of acknowledging God in law and government. How can you help? Please make a tax-deductible contribution, allowing foundation attorneys to continue the fight. You may also purchase various foundation products as well at morallaw.org. Located in Montgomery, Alabama, the Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 founded by Judge Roy Moore. Please partner with us to achieve this important mission. morallaw.org.
I know I tell lots of stories, but stories are things that we can hang truth upon oftentimes, and I don't mean hang them by the neck until dead. I think they're good reminders. We can give it a context, we can give it a feel, and oftentimes it helps us make it alive. And so I tell a lot of stories, I know, and I got family members that are pretty critical about that, but when you get my age, I guess it's still okay to do that. But at any rate, before the break, I was talking about Citizen Genet, the French ambassador that came to the United States during Washington's administration. And by the way, Jefferson was the Secretary of State, and Genet really came not to strengthen, some kind of handshake and friendship between France and the United States, except for how he might be able to raise the rabble and to come into the latest conflict with England that France was engaged in. At any rate, Genet came and meandered his way through the country without presenting his papers to the president and the general government. He was out kind of trying to work his own agenda. And as he went through the United States, he started clubs, if you will, associations, Democratic Republican clubs. And, of course, we're all told today that that's what Jefferson and the boys was Democratic Republicans. That was their party. And word came to Washington and to Jefferson. They were livid. I don't know, it should be fairly well known that Washington had kind of a very strong temper. When you got on his wrong side, I mean, he could chew you down. Anyway, Jefferson and Washington were livid about what Genet had done. and they basically asked France to recall him. Now, by the time it got back and forth across the ocean, the revolutionaries had kind of changed their stripes a little bit, and he would have lost his head. And ultimately, Washington gave him asylum, if you will, and let him, stay in the United States. He lived in New York the rest of his life. Anyway, but what Washington and Jefferson did is they launched a campaign with very blistering, unequivocal position that these democratic Republican societies were the antithesis of what the American philosophy of government and liberty was about. And so these guys were instrumental in shutting down the democratic Republican societies. Now, historians since then have hung that denomination upon Jefferson and those that followed on from him. Oh, they were Democratic Republicans. No, they weren't. Their own words would absolutely set that aside. But over time, these historians have let that wheedle into our heart. Everybody says Jefferson's a Democratic Republican. And nothing could be further from the truth. The definition of terms was really important to them. And that term had its origins, or maybe not its exact origins, but it had its application in the French Revolution, which was a debauchery of what liberty is. And by the way, sadly, when it first started up, Jefferson had great hope. He had spent a lot of time as the ambassador to France, and he loved the French people, their culture, their language, their food, all that kind of stuff. And when the French Revolution first started up, Jefferson was really excited. He was like, "Oh man, liberty is spreading to Europe. It's going to be so cool. We just got to support this." There was an Englishman by the name of Edmund Burke that was really kind of more American than English in terms of his support for liberty. He saw through it immediately, and he wrote like a several hundred-page denunciation of the French Revolution, because he felt like it was going to be based upon debauchery and the twisting of liberty into its wrong perspective. So anyway, at first, Jefferson was really ticked off at Burke, and then he came to be understanding, wow, this French Revolution really did take a left turn literally. So anyway, these guys were brilliant. I mean, we got the 4th of July coming up, and their understanding and everything that was out there, they were not naive in the sense that they didn't understand the positions that needed to be taken in order to uphold individual God-given rights.
They understood, and they also understood the difference in our revolution versus the French Revolution. Ours was based on God as in his heavens, and we needed God as our guide, and God as our protector, and God as our inspiration, whereas the French Revolution was based on tyrannical agenda for power and manipulation, and there's primarily the difference. The unique thing in America, though, is, Sheriff Mack won his case. It was incredible. States' rights were brought back. The First Amendment, all different amendments have been touched by Sheriff Mack's broad win over this. And the 28th year celebration was on the 27th of this month. We're bringing it up a little bit late because we had some other obligations and people are traveling and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, we wanted to celebrate it. But what's interesting now, Sheriff, is the Supreme Court case that just came out saying that, hey, these different appellate judges can't just shut down Trump at every turn. Not only does the general government not have authority to shut down people at the state level and the local level and commandeer them and demand they do things, the opposite is true, that these local thugs can't control the general government. It's a jurisdictional discussion, both directions. And a recent decision protecting Trump and stopping these appellate judges all over the country proves the point that it's true both directions because of jurisdictional boundaries.
Well, yeah, and how that ever got to the point that somebody felt like it had to, it's like, duh. That could have almost been the response of the Supreme Court on this thing. Here we have these district judges, and yep, they're Article 3 judges. They were appointed and they were, nominated and appointed to this job. But to say some yo-yo in San Diego or Albuquerque, or you pick your city, whatever it is, can absolutely shut down the operation of the general government in the fulfillment of its legally constituted authorities is absolutely absurd. And that is how we've gotten to that point, because almost nobody, including apparently most of the judges that are out there, which doesn't surprise us because they're educated at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and BYU and University of Utah. I mean, you pick your location. The judges have this absurd pride in their priestcraft. I mean, in their, shall we say, their profession. And I think back, when I ran for Senate against Orrin Hatch years and years ago, and Hatch was famous for saying stuff like, he was in the Senate and absurd things would come before the Senate. And he'd say, well, let's just pass it and see what the courts do with it. And I'm saying, are you kidding me? Here is an attorney, which is what Hatch was, and so he has this pride in his craft. But here they are, he's in a legislative assignment. He took an oath of office, and he wants to delegate their authority as legislators to the courts because of his pride of his craft that he was trained in his ministry, if you will. And the fact is that the pushback, Mack mentioned the 51st Federalist Paper and the 47th Federalist Paper that we mentioned too. These individuals in their office have to have that pushback. And for somebody to say, well, let's just pass it and see what happens in the courts. That we go back to the statement I started this little segment in. Jefferson was adamant that everybody recognize their responsibility under the Constitution to uphold the Constitution, and everybody act accordingly. And Orrin Hatch and all the other yo-yos that were in the Congress and continue to be in the Congress need to say, I'm going to evaluate this bill based upon a plain English language reading of the United States Constitution. Well, one other thing. I know, Sam, I rattle on and on. We're almost out of this hour. But one thing that people need to understand very clearly, I am absolutely adamantly, and everybody that's ever listened to this should know that I am absolutely opposed to rewriting the Constitution. But the Constitution gives two ways in Article 5 that the Constitution may be changed. One is by 2/3 of both houses. They bring forth and pass an amendment, a proposed amendment, and it goes out to the states, and 3/4 of the states ratify. The other possibility is to call a convention, and then that has to be ratified by the people.
And both of those are very extreme measures, and the high bar is set because, hey, the founders understood that changing the Constitution for light reasons doesn't make any sense either. It needs to be like a super majority is the point here, to where, hey, that cannot happen unless there's real intent, really a justifiable reason. And that was on purpose by the founders. They understood this very well. We celebrate Richard Mack's decision. He won over Bill Clinton, protected many of our Bill of Rights in that win. 10th Amendment primarily. It's the greatest 10th Amendment decision in my mind ever written. And the important thing to know coming out of this is the courts have ruled even in modern day the opposite's true. Hey, you can't shut down the president from his jurisdictional authority and his defined constitutional responsibilities either. Okay, so understand there's checks and balances vertically and horizontally, and the courts are doubling down when they get the chance and saying they must be obeyed and that you can't run roughshod over each other. You're supposed to check each other, that's true, but you can't obliterate and steal authority that you don't have. And that's really the point. Both directions, all directions, any branch of government, any jurisdictional boundaries cannot be violated and crossed for reasons that are supposed. Anyway, great news for that. Hour 1 in the can. Hour 2 coming up. They're still reading the big old, over 900-page, big, beautiful, bogus boondoggle. They're working on that right now. Sadly, Mike Lee was voting against it. Now he's changed his mind and voted for it. That's a disappointment, to say the least. Hour 1 of the can, hour 2 coming up. Dr. Scott Bradley with me. FreedomsRisingSun.com. Yours truly, nationally syndicated by LovingLiberty.net. Spread the word, share the love, and God save the Republic of the United States of America.